John was heading down a surprisingly large basement, wondering how far down these stairs actually went. He was unable to see anything in the darkness other than a small sliver of light far away from him. But somewhere far, inside a cave, something was resting. An insect-like leg extended from its body, stretching out as more legs emerged, slamming down on the ground as the creature began to stand. Right now, here, living creatures of Earth, hibernating in darkness, began to wake. Their blood, which had slowly hardened into a clear solid inside their vessels, slowly began to soften. And the colorless, transparent blood made their bodies tremble so that it could flow smoothly through the network of arteries. Their hearts started to thump little by little, as a warm current ran through their sleeping mechanisms, and their highly complex joints began to turn. The first 12 ants had awakened now, bearing the mission of rousing all the others from sleep and heading out towards the vast outside world to gather heat energy, ripping through the seal that they had put on their hole as they stepped outside. With just a height of 1 millimeter, these ants had built 50 levels underground and 50 levels above ground. It was the largest city in the area, with an estimated population of about 18 million, an annual output of 50 liters of honeydew from aphids and 10 liters of honeydew from cochineal insects, 4 kilograms of oyster mushrooms, and 1 ton of discarded stone fragments. There were 120 kilometers of functional tunnels and a surface area of 2 square meters. It was a gigantic city of fire ants, Belokan. The 12 ants that wake up first in the vast city of Belokan must restart the city that stopped during the winter. Whoever wakes up first is driven by instinct to bring the warmth of sunlight back down into the burrow to the other sleeping ants. Among those 12 ants, there was a single male ant capable of reproduction. He was a little smaller than the average Belokan ant, and his upper jaw was narrower than the others. His name was number 327, and his fate was to die a few months from now. 327 shares his warmth with a sleeping worker ant. The worker ant woke up and reached out its antennae to identify who woke it. The first segment tells his age, which is 173 days. The second tells rank. His rank was a fertile male. The third segment tells about his city and species, a forest fire ant born in the mother city, Belokan. And the fourth segment is his egg number. The egg number becomes his name. Counting from early autumn, he was the 327th egg laid. He was male ant, 327. From the fifth segment on, they no longer emit scent information, but each segment still has its own function. The ants that wake up go with the earlier ones to rouse their sleeping kin and repair the inside and outside of their city, Belokan. While 327 was carrying a branch 60 times his own weight, a soldier ant came up to him with a new proposal, asking 327 to go hunting with him. 327 was curious, asking what they were hunting, as the ant told him that they had found meat right before winter set in. Explaining that it was in an area 23 degrees west of the noonday sun, tasting the sample, 327 realized that it was leaf beetle meat, but he was confused, as the beetles should be hibernating right now. However, the ant informed him that this meat came from a special place. It was an area that was unusually warm because of the groundwater, so there was no winter there. This surprised 327, as he agreed, saying that he would go with him. Inside the anthill, the ants gathered, with a soldier ant telling them that a new season had begun, and 28 explorers had been selected. They were now going to set out on the glorious first expedition for the Belokan ants. The expedition party seemed quite used to traveling for long distances. Their heavy abdomens were packed full of formic acid, and their heads were equipped with powerful weapons. And then there was 327, the only reproductive ant. The armor, like plates on the thoraxes of the soldier ants, still bore the marks of many battles. They marched forward for hours on end, passing several cities that belonged to the same federation. All of them were sister cities of the Ni dynasty. There was Audolubakan, which produces the most grain, Juliakan, which sent a brave army of soldier ants 2 years ago to conquer the southern termite cities, Zetabinakan, a chemical lab that produces highly concentrated battle-grade formic acid, and Libukan, which ferments cochineal honeydew into a tasty resin-flavored alcohol. Fire ants not only live together in cities like this, but several cities can also unite to form a federation. Belokan was part of a relatively young federation. It had only been 50,000 years since the first dynasty was founded. It was said that the first queen got lost long ago in a terrible storm and wandered until she reached this place. She founded Balokan, and over hundreds of generations, queens of the Ni dynasty were born, creating the federation that exists today. The ants on the expedition passed through Lasolacan, the westernmost of the Federation's 64 branch cities, and reach a small mound. An ant informs 327 that once hunting and war begin, this patch of grass will soon be swarming with soldier ants, and the city they see up north was the enemy city, Shigefu. Luckily, the enemy should still be asleep for the winter, so they could keep marching to their destination without stopping. One of the ants then noticed something, explaining that the guiding scent trail ended there, so from now on, they will have to follow the tracks on the ground. Suddenly, a scream startled them as they turned around to see an ant getting stuck on something. 327 said that they have to save him, but was stopped by another ant, who explained that once an ant was lured in and caught by the scent of a sundew, rescue was impossible. All they could do now was set up a warning sign for their kin. With that, they kept heading west, leaving behind the trapped Eni, keeping their eyes front for danger. Another ant then noticed that there was a pheromone marking the entrance to a cave. This was it. They had finally arrived at their destination. Just then, they noticed a stream of water. It was a hot spring, as all the ants rushed towards the warm water. But then the ground started shaking, as they saw a giant stone rolling at them. The leader told them to calm down, explaining that it was a dung beetle, telling the others to just let it pass, as it tasted bad and its shell was heavy. It was nothing but a pain to carry back to their nest. Then, suddenly, something crawled over their heads, as the ants were now faced with an earwig. The ant declared that this one tasted good, as they all started attacking it, hitting the earwig with formic acid. The ants then ambushed the insect, eating it for its delicious meat. Their leader told them to eat up and regain their strength, for thanks to the hot spring, there were lots of prey still awake here. But suddenly, something huge smashed into the ground near them, as the ants now came to face a giant bat. They were stunned as the bat started thrashing around, throwing rocks at them. 327 asked the leader how they were supposed to stop the monster's attacks, wondering if it was going to kill them all and eat them. The leader explained that the creature they were facing was called a bat, explaining that it was just screaming and bluffing because it was afraid that they would enter its territory. The leader then told them all to fire formic acid at the bat, as they all started attacking. As the acid hit the bat, it entered its eyes and mouth, driving it away from the ants. Formic acid at 40% concentration worked like a corrosive. When an earwig was hit, it made its body split open, and even a huge bat could do nothing but flee. For the next few days, the 27 Belicon expedition ants explored the warm caves and gathered food. They sprayed pheromones from their rear glands like planting a flag in the captured land, leaving behind the chemicals that mark the territory of the Belokan Federation. This season's first expedition party of 28 ants successfully completed its mission by extending their kin's hunting ground beyond the western thicket. The ants were now hurrying back to their nest as they had to reach the city before sunset. Once night falls and the temperature drops, their bodies will stiffen. From March to October, ants can work non-stop, all day, all night, without resting. But when the temperature falls, they grow sluggish and eventually fall asleep. That's why expeditions lasting more than a day were rare, and these brave ants were risking that danger. Just then, one of the ants smelled something. They suggested that they should pull up that plant and bring it for their queen. At someone's suggestion, everyone gathers, and the pheromone debate begins within the ants. With the ant saying that their queen mother did not know about this kind of plant, so if they handle it the wrong way, it could cost them their lives. One argues that even if they try to carry it, they do not have enough ants, with another saying that if they learn to control these carnivorous plants, it would become a great power for the whole Federation. Just planting a row of them would make their defenses much stronger. The leader then told everyone to call back their pheromones, saying that they were exhausted and the sun was going to set soon. So the ants decided to give up and not go near the carnivorous plant. However, as they were walking, they came across some daffodils, noticing how beautiful the flowers were. 327 said that the Queen Mother would be pleased if they brought this to her. They had left the sundew behind, but he should take this one. As he clipped the flower off its stem, carrying it, he knew that the others would say that he did well. Now all that was left was to catch up with the group. But as 327 was about to join them, he saw that all the ants had been killed. Seeing their bodies all broken and trampled on the ground, he did not understand what had happened, shivering in fear. 327 wondered just what in the world happened there. He noticed that the ants had died still, in a snakehead formation. They had not even fired a single blast of formic acid, meaning that they had no time to sound an alarm, pheromone, or even form battle lines. He hoped that there might still be some information left in their antennae, touching them with his own, but there was nothing left at all, making him question how this was even possible. He then noticed foam coming out of their mouth, picking it up as he hoped that there was something in there. He brought it close to his head, rubbing it on his body. 327, then lightly shook his cleaned antennae at a rate of 300 vibrations per second. When he detected nothing, he raised the frequency to 1,000, then 500, and then 2,000 vibrations per second. At ultra-high speed, a world of tiny particles began to unfold. Water vapor rising from the dew, pollen and spores, he was able to feel them all. 327 realized that he had smelled this before, trying to recall what it was. 327 pushed his antennae up to 12,000 vibrations per second, creating a tiny suction current that pulled in every particle around him. With this, he finally understood. It was the dwarf ants from Shigefu in the north, surprised that they had already woken up from their sleep. 327 thought that they must have lain in ambush and used some lightning-fast new weapon to wipe out his comrades in an instant. He needed to warn the others, rushing towards the nest to alert them about the danger. 10,000 years ago, the fire ant queen of the vanished Gay dynasty, Bistenga, was possessed by a vain desire to know where the world ends. She sent expeditions out hundreds of times towards the 4 key directions, but not a single party ever returned. The current queen, Velokikuni, was not nearly as greedy. She was content to discover a small Golden beetle and to observe carnivorous plants, satisfied with the hope that they might someday be tamed. Velokikuni knew that the best way to learn about a new region was to expand the Federation into it. More long-range missions, more branch cities, and more forward bases meant constant war against anything that blocked territorial growth. Conquering the end of the world was surely a distant dream, but slow, stubborn advance fits perfectly with the ants' philosophy. Slowly, but always forward. The setting sun rose like an orange egg in the sky. Queen Velokikuni's 327th male ant has just had his comrades slaughtered by the enemy on the very first spring hunting expedition. Gripped by fear that someone might track down and kill the lone survivor, he raced in panic back towards his home city. Today of all days, home felt especially dear, and today of all days, home felt unbearably far away. As he ran forward with all his might, he questioned how the Shigefu dwarf ants had already woken from their winter sleep. He wondered in fear what kind of new weapon that must have created. So powerful that they could butcher 26 comrades in an instant without sound or trace. He questioned if he would make it home alive, making it back to his city, where his mother was. He ran only towards home. Replacing the warm light of the sun, a bright white light came into view as John was making his way across the dark basement, walking down the cave-like structures. His breathing had become heavy, and he was sweating, looking around the large caverns. John tried to get a hold of himself, as he could not let his fear swallow him. He kept walking through the halls, shouting out for Uwar, hoping to find him, as he ran deeper into the caves. But somewhere else, a scent trail had come to an end, as the comforting smell of Belacan lured in 327 like a beacon. 327 was now tired and gasping for air as he finally reached his beloved home. The top of the city, Belacan, was under construction as they added one more layer of cover over its rounded roof, making it rise high enough to tickle the moon. 327 realized that the night had already fallen and the moon was up. The other ants were getting ready to come in quickly, as the sun was down and the air was getting cold. So they had to shut the doors before the chill could seep in. But just as they were about to, a voice called out to them as they saw 327, who was in a very bad shape. The ant was surprised to see him, wondering if he was just some lost drifter ant. But 327 told him that he was a Belacan ant, just like them. The ant was shocked to see him in such a terrible shape, saying that he reeked of exhaustion. Sensing male ant 327's fatigue, a worker ant offered to share food with him. 327 accepted it, slowly lowering its antennae. He could barely stand, and his whole body was on the verge of seizing up. The two of them pressed mouth to mouth, and from what is called a social stomach, the worker ant passed on gruel like stored food to the worn-out comrade. 327 thanked them for saving his life. He then rushed off to report what had happened on the expedition, saying that there was no time as something terrible had happened, alerting them of the emergency as a war was upon them. The other ants asked him what was going on, as 327 explained that the dwarf ants had wiped out their first expedition party, saying that they had a deadly, highly effective new weapon. He then called out to the battle stations, saying that war had begun, as ants started gathering around to hear what 327 had to say. They then asked him for proof, wondering if he had any proof of what had happened and if his story was true. They asked 327 where this had supposedly happened, as he replied that it was to the west of Lasolacon, between their cities and the new hunting grounds the scouts found, saying that the dwarf ants patrolled that area from time to time. The ants refused to believe this, saying that their informants had already scouted there and had reported that the dwarf ants were still asleep. Their spies' reports could not be wrong, so they all started leaving, commenting on how 327 was making such claims with no proof, saying that he was probably so exhausted that he was seeing things, or his judgment was shot. Spring wars never started this early, and if some dwarf ants attacked while some of them were still asleep, they would be crazy. For 327, who was the sole survivor of the first expedition, this was utterly absurd. The crowd has chosen to trust the words from some anonymous antennae and not to trust 327. He questioned if they were trying to say that he had made it all up, wondering why they wouldn't believe him. He told them to check the numbers in each rank, and they would find that there were ants missing. Then they will know that he was telling the truth. But the ants did not listen to him, going about their own ways. This was insane for 327, as no one would trust him. He couldn't even make them see a simple, obvious fact. But he couldn't give up. He was the only explorer who survived the expedition, remembering the eyes and the legs of his comrades. He would wake his people no matter what. However, the other ants found his ranting irritating, telling him to stop running around and stirring things up, as all he was doing was making noise. So 327 stayed silent as he went back to the cave. Meanwhile, the basement door was still closed, as Lucy stood before it, staring at it. Kik said that it had been 4 hours since his dad went down the basement, wondering if they should call the police. But his mom remained silent. One day, destiny will guide your fingers onto these pages, and your eyes will lick over these words, and your brain will unravel the meaning behind them. He just hoped that moment would not come too soon, because the outcome could be horrifying. These were the words of Edmund Wells. This is why, as he wrote this, he was fighting to protect his secret. Yet sooner or later, they must learn what happened to him. No matter how deep a secret was buried, it would eventually rise to the surface of the lake. Time was a secret's worst enemy. Whoever they were, reading these lines, he wanted to greet them first. By the time they read this, he will probably have been dead for 10 years, or perhaps for 100. With that, he stopped writing, closing his encyclopedia of relative and absolute knowledge. He got up from his desk, switching off the table lamp, as the room was again filled with darkness. No one would believe a word, 327 says, but as he was walking through the halls, dejected, he suddenly got an idea to tell this directly to the queen, deciding to report the matter to Velokikuni. Ordinary ants live at most 3 years, but the queen mother had survived 14 winters, so she had a wealth of experience. So he hoped that she would understand and listen to him. 327. Pushed into a passage where thousands of worker ants, each carrying an egg, were hauling the eggs from level 40 underground up to the sunlit nursery on level 35 above ground. He slipped past the egg-carrying column and entered a small side tunnel. It was pitch black, but thanks to the simple eyes on his forehead that sense infrared, he moved without losing his way. The closer he came to the restricted central zone of the city, the stronger the mother's scent grew, and the more guard ants he saw. However, 372 carried a scent that acted as a pass, so he passed the checkpoint without trouble. This was the last corridor leading to the mother's chamber as he came to face another guard standing in the way. Smelling his scent, the guard allowed him to pass, as 327 finally made his way into the Queen Mother's chamber, which was a large room filled with her scent. The city's only egg layer, the one who gave body and mind to every single ant here. The queen, who had waged countless wars in her reign, had conquered the southern termite cities. She had broken the record for long life and was also the mother of 327. Velokikuni, the queen of the central fire ant city. She had a long head with large round eyes and simple infrared sensing eyes clustered in the middle of her forehead, while her antennae were spread strangely far apart. At her side, a nurse ant always stood ready to receive new eggs. As the queen laid another egg, the nurse ant picked it up, taking care of it. 327 used scent to identify the sexes. Recognizing that only males and non-reproductive soldiers were being born right now. The glands that produced daughters were dormant because of the cold. But once the weather improves, the queen mother will lay as many eggs of every rank as the city requires. The queen mother then told 327 to come closer as he approached to meet her. A queen's saliva was a medicine that healed every wound, so she applied it to 327, happy to see that her child had come to see her. She welcomed him as the one who had returned to the womb of the people. He may have left her embrace, yet could never fail to return. As an explorer, he was their legs. On sight, he served as their eyes. And now, he had come back to awaken his people. The 327 was happy to see that his mother believed what he had to say. She assured him that he was certain of what he saw. However, the problem was that he could not be the one to awaken their people. Since his pheromones had failed to persuade anyone, he had believed that only Velokikuni could reveal the truth to the nation, and that is why he had come to her. She sensed the death and traces of the inexplicable from his antennae, saying that a way may be coming, or maybe it might not. Whether what he said was true or not was something she could not decide by herself. In this city, every major decision was made only when the group that would handle the task reached a firm and unanimous agreement. 327 said that this was the most urgent issue they were facing, telling her that they must send spies at once and discover what this secret weapon was. But Velokikuni said that there was still a mountain of things their people must treat as top priority. The waking from the winter sleep was not even finished yet, and repairs outside the city were only beginning. And that was not all. Their people also needed protein and sugar. They also needed to prepare the festival of new life as well, so even if she wanted to send spies, they did not have enough ants to spare. Velokikuni was stressed as she went back to playing with the carnivorous plant again. If they could build a fence of these carnivorous plants, they could defend their entire northwestern border. But there was one problem they needed to solve, as these little monsters still could not tell the difference between city residents and outside intruders. 327 asked his mother about the comrades who died on that expedition. She asked him how many ants the accident killed, to which 327 said that it was 27. She then asked if all the dead ants were explorer ants, which were a subclass of soldier ants. 327 replied that they indeed were, saying that he was the only male ant among them. The queen went into thought, as she then laid another egg, which the nurse ant picked up. 327 was amazed as he saw Queen Velokikuni lay 27 new eggs to replace the 27 that had died. 327 said nothing more, as there was nothing he could do. 327 walked away from the queen mother's lair, disappointed by how the conversation had gone, but he could not let it end like this. They could not just gloss over the deaths of those 27 ants. He had to find out what new weapon the dwarf ants had used on the expedition. But the problem was that he could not be the one to awaken their people, as his pheromones were not strong enough. But that did not mean that he would stop. He would convince them somehow. 327 then again let out his pheromones, telling everyone that their whole expedition had been wiped out in the dwarf ant ambush. The ants were irritated that he was still going on about that, telling him that he was noisy and to go away, as they were busy working there. As they all left to go back to their work, 327 could not believe this. No one was listening to him, making him question what he should do. He had to warn them about this danger somehow. Just then, 327 heard something. Turning around, it sounded like someone was limping along, and they had been tailing him for a while now. Sensing the scent molecules, he realized that it was a young 1-year-old soldier ant. But there was something different about this smell, as there was another scent mixed in, different from normal Belican ants. He realized that it was the smell of a rock as he felt someone coming up behind him. 327 turned around to ask who they were and why they were following him, but he came face to face with a soldier ant who was standing in the darkness, completely silent. 327 understood that this was bad, thinking that he should get away. But he was suddenly blocked by another ant on the opposite side, facing him down. He realized that this ant smelled like rocks as well, but then the ants started running towards him, surrounding him with their jaws wide open. They started biting 327, as he pleaded that he was one of them from the same city, telling them that they were making a mistake, as he was not the enemy. 327 then released his pheromones from his antennae, trying to prove it to them, but the ant suddenly noticed this and started rubbing his antennae. 327 realized that he was scrubbing the scent off of his body, panicking as, without his smell, he was nothing and did not exist for the nest. He could not hold out any longer, wondering if this was how he was going to die. He could not understand why they were trying to kill him, why they were trying to erase them from this world. Wondering if this is how he will quietly disappear from this world. But suddenly the ground began shaking as 327 was shocked by the earthquake. Within the darkness, there was an ominous door. A man stood before the door, staring at it with a blank expression on his face. The man was completely focused on the door, as if he felt something just by looking at it. Then, suddenly, a bright light appeared above him, shocking the man. Jonathan's wife said that they should fix the entrance light switch first, stating how he had gone first to turn on the lights but was now just standing there. She asked him if it was his fear of the dark again, telling him to get over it, as he was not a kid anymore. Jonathan told her that his body just freezes up on its own, so he couldn't help it. He had even quit his job because of that, even though he knew that they did not have extra money. He argued that he did not quit, but was fired instead, making his wife let out a sigh. Still, it was a relief that his uncle had left them a house like this, and now that they had a house this big, it was like a dream come true. Jonathan was happy that life always found a way, telling her not to worry as he would find another job soon. His son and dog then came around running, asking where his room was. His mom told him that his room was on the right, at the back of the hallway, pointing at it. The boy ran off with his dog, Or, with his parents smiling to see their son so excited. The boy was amazed to see his room, commenting on how huge it was. Jonathan told Nicholas that it was indeed his room, saying that if he did not like it, he could look at the other rooms too. Nick said that he loved his room, but he still wanted to check out the other rooms as he ran off with Or. Jonathan was happy to see his son enjoy. His wife then asked him what kind of person his uncle was. Wondering how close he was to his nephew, to leave John such a big house like this from the Cyberites by the forest of Fontainebleau. Even if it was a basement level, it was still 5 times bigger than the place they had lived before. John admitted that he did not remember much about his uncle Edmund either. He was his mother's only family, and according to his mother, he always watched with interest to see how John was growing up. When he was little, his uncle Edmund used to hold him upside down and pretend that he was an aeroplane. But John used to be so scared that he would pee on Edmund's face. That was the only memory he had of him. John's wife laughed at how he was a scaredy cat even since he was a kid. She then asked what his grandma had said, as he had told her that he would go see her and ask about Uncle Edmund. John tried to recall her words, but before he could, he saw Nick trying to get into the door from before. The door was really old, so Nick started banging on it, with War barking at it as if he saw something. He then saw that there was a padlock on the door, but there was a gap, so he tried to look through it into the room, as War continued barking. John told him that he was not supposed to open that door, but his wife also said that she was curious about it. It looked like a basement as they peeked at it, with Nick getting excited that their new house had a basement. Nick excitedly said that they should open it, with his mom agreeing to see what is inside. But John then shouted at them not to open the door, making the whole family and even the dog turn back and look at him. John explained to them that the door must never be opened, making his son question why they shouldn't. John just looked at them with a nervous expression, but his wife also asked why they couldn't open the door. John tried to answer them, saying that the basement was actually crawling with rats, making his wife panic as she told him to hurry up and block the door. At night, The entire family was sleeping peacefully, but John was still awake, sitting at the dining table. He was staring at an envelope, remembering the words of his grandmother that his uncle Edmund had left him a letter, telling her to give it to him if he ever died. John asked his grandma what kind of person his uncle was, to which she said that he was a very special child. His uncle caused a lot of trouble from a young age, starting with toys, and then clocks and audio equipment. He once even messed with the fridge, and they had to throw out all the food. One time, he built himself a hideout inside the house, and stayed only in there. Even his patient grandfather reached his limit with Edmund's actions. And in the end, he destroyed Edmund's hideout completely. That day, the relationship between him and their family completely changed. John said that all kids were like that when they were little, but his grandma told him that it got even worse when Edmund became a student, asking if he wanted to hear about it. John's mom had always said that his uncle was a genius. His grandma said that his mother, Sylvie, had really believed that. She also knew that he was not just some troublemaker, he was simply someone who was out of step with everyone else. This sentence confused John, as his grandmother gave him a puzzle, saying that it was something Edmund made when he was 11, asking him to make 4 equilateral triangles using 6 matchsticks. John said that he was good at things like this, as he got busy with the puzzle, but being unable to solve it, he asked his grandma for the answer. His grandma told him that an 11-year-old Edmund had said this, that they have to think about it differently, for if they think the way ordinary people do, they will never find the answer. His grandma then took out a box, saying that Edmond had left a letter saying that if he died, it absolutely had to be given to him, handing over the envelope to John. John opened it and took out a letter, which told him that above all, no matter what happens, he should never go down to the basement. In the house, in the dead of the night, the basement door rattled. The next morning, John left for some work. His wife was angry that he had to go out today, when they had just moved in the day before, and Nick also said that they had a ton of stuff to unpack. John apologized, saying that the person he was going to meet was free only for today. He then remembered that his wife had said that she needed to go out as well, making Nick feel that his parents had betrayed him. They then reminded Nick not to open the door for strangers, even if they call him, as the two left. John was staring at a photo in his grandma's house. She explained that it was a photo of his mom and his uncle when they were young. John asked his grandma about how his uncle died, to which she said that he was stung to death by wasps, something that even came up in the newspapers. The officers had told her that they had never seen a body with that many stings in their lives. John was shocked to hear this. He then asked her if there was anyone else who knew his uncle well. She said that Edmund had a childhood friend whom he saw often, someone who had even gone to college with him, and his name was Jean-Jules Brazel. In the present day, John found himself standing before a huge man, asking him if he was Jules. Jules invited John into his house, serving him tea as they got to talking. Jules told John that Edmund was a living mystery, something no one could deny. They had studied biology together at the university, and while he specialized in botany, Edmund's major was in bacteria. John was confused about this, but Jules continued, saying that Edmund said his research was simply to help people understand their ancestors. He wanted to understand cells at their most primitive stage. He had believed that humans were nothing more than a collection of cells, and that you have to thoroughly understand the psychology of a single cell. Jules did not know how to put it, but Edmund was a bit outside the norm. Jules found himself thinking of him even more today. John then told him that he had heard his uncle was writing an encyclopedia, making Jules' face light up upon hearing about it. Back at their home, someone rang the bell at John's house. Nick asked them who they were, as he looked through the eye-hole to see a man introducing himself as GNU, saying that he was here about a book-binding job. Nick slightly opened the door, peeking at the man who stood before him, telling him to please come back another time, but the man just stared at him, making their dog uneasy. GNU asked if there were no adults at home, saying that Professor Wells had asked their shop to bind some books. Nick told him that Professor Wells was his great-uncle, but he had passed away, which is why he began closing the door. But the man wedged his foot in the door, stopping him from closing it. GNU said that he should offer his deepest condolences, asking Nick if Edmund had perhaps left behind any large bundles of documents, as the boy looked at him nervously. Jules was excited to hear about the encyclopedia, saying that it was an ambitious idea, which was very much like Edmund Wells. explaining how Edmund had said that he was going to gather all his knowledge into a single work. John asked him if he had ever seen that encyclopedia, but Jules remained silent on it. At home, GNU was trying to keep the door open, telling Nick that he thought Professor Wells was trying to create something like an encyclopedia, saying that he had said that he would drop by their shop, but they had never heard from him again. Even if he had passed away, a promise was still a promise, so he was in a bit of a bind, saying that there should be a big red file folder somewhere in the house. The man said that Edmund called it the Encyclopedia of Relative and Absolute Knowledge, with a crazy look in his eyes. Jules asked if John was wondering if he had seen the encyclopedia, explaining that he hadn't, but Edmund probably hadn't shown it to anyone yet, saying that he must have hidden it away somewhere like a treasure. John was content with this answer, and back at the house, Nick slammed the door shut, saying that if there was something like that in their house, he would have found it already. This had made GNU irritated. John then asked if, by any chance, Jules knew how to make 4 equilateral triangles with 6 matchsticks. Jules said that he actually did, saying that Edmund often used that to test people's intelligence. John was excited to hear this, asking him how to do it. But Jules said that he couldn't just give him the answer because Edmund said that everyone has to find their own path by themselves. Lastly, John passed Jules the letter Edmond had left him, asking him if he could take a look at it. Jules picked up the note curiously, saying that it was definitely Edmond's handwriting. John asked if he had ever heard anything about the basement, to which Jules said that he sadly hadn't, disappointing John. But if Desmond had left a message like that, John should absolutely obey it. At night, the basement door rattled again, with the dog barking at it. The door began creaking as War kept growling at it. But just then, the door opened, as the room was filled with a creepy noise. The next day, John was shocked to hear that War was gone. Nick said that he was nowhere to be seen with a sad face. John told Nick to stay calm and keep looking for him for a bit more. His wife then called out to him, saying that she was pretty sure that Awar had gone down into the basement. Pointing to the floor, she explained that there were clumps of fur specifically piled up right in front of the basement door, shocking them. But John told both of them to calm down, saying that Uwar might have gone outside. But his wife said that it was impossible, as the front door had been locked the entire time, with his son joining in, saying that War had definitely gone down into the basement. His wife told him that it was time to show what he had learned at his old job, telling him to hurry up and open the lock. But John still hesitated, reminding them that they were not supposed to go into the basement. But his wife demanded to know why exactly they couldn't, as they started arguing, telling John to open the door. All the images of the people warning John not to enter the basement flashed through his mind, making him scared. His wife then told him to look at the gap in the door, saying that it was more than enough for Uwar to get through. So, he had definitely gone in this way. John was, however, still quite nervous, staring at the door in terror as his eyes fell on the darkness he could see within the gap, making him drown in his fear of darkness again. His wife and son tried calling out to him, but John was lost in the darkness of the door, feeling its ominous energy as his face curled up. He told his family that they should go look outside and call the shelter too, saying that he felt sorry for Uwar too, but if they really could not find him, they could just get another dog. His son shouted at him, asking how he could even say that since War was his friend. His wife asked him if he was in his right mind, wondering if he thought that War was just a replaceable dog to them. She understood that he was afraid of the dark, telling him that she would go in and get Awar herself, asking him just to pick the lock for her. Otherwise, she would just smash it open herself. John was devastated, gripping his hand as he told them that he would be the one to go down there. After all, he was the one who should protect their family. John then broke open the lock, picking up a metal pipe and flashlight as he got ready to head downstairs. He told his wife that no matter how long it takes, she absolutely must not come down after him, and not to call the police either. Nick asked him why they couldn't, with a confused face, as John said that if the police came, they would come down into the basement, and that must never happen. His wife said that he was making a fuss over just going down to the basement, admitting that she was disgusted by rats as well, but still, it was just a room. John just laughed off her comment as he headed down. He could not tell Lucy and Nick the truth about his Uncle Edmund, as they would just say that they should move somewhere else, something they could not afford right now. Just in case, he locked the door behind him from inside, so that Nick or Lucy could not follow him. But as he did, his fear of the dark began to overwhelm him again, making his body shake uncontrollably as his eyes darted around. His family was concerned to see him through the gap as Lucy shouted out to him to take a deep breath, snapping him out of his trance. She told him that he could get through this, making John finally calm down as he started breathing normally. He then gripped the flashlight and let out a sigh, assuring them that he would be okay, asking them not to worry as he turned towards the basement. Heading down the stairs with the light, as the two looked at him, Nick asked his mom when his dad was coming back, as it had been 8 hours since his dad went down to the basement. Lucy was still standing before the door, saying that she could not take it anymore. She was about to call the police, but a voice came from the basement door, reminding her that he had told her not to use the phone. John came out of the door in a dirty and tired shape, holding on to Uwar's body as he said how they must have been worried. Nick and Lucy were surprised to see him, with Lucy saying angrily about how they could not be worried with him looking like that. But Nick was devastated to see Uwar, as he saw his body in John's hand, being all cut up and battered. He screamed as he ran towards him, asking him to snap out of it, but he broke down crying as War did not respond. John was also quite broken by this, while Lucy was confused as to what had happened. Nick kept screaming and crying, seeing his friend in such a condition, but Lucy asked John just what had happened in the basement. John was unable to answer her, as a weak smile crept up on his face, making Lucy shake in a storm of emotions. They then laid Uwar's mangled body down on a towel, with Nick still crying over him. John said that tomorrow they should take him to the Père Lachaise cemetery for dogs. They will buy a 2,500 franc grave there and put his picture on it. Nick agreed to this while still sobbing, saying that War deserved at least this much. John said that after that, they will go to the animal shelter and bring home another dog, asking if they should get a Maltese, as they were pretty cute. But Lucy was still speechless, unable to comprehend what had just happened. Yet she stayed quiet and quietly agreed to the idea. However, she was still determined to find out. She asked John what was down there, but he just stayed quiet and looked at her, saying that there was nothing, nothing at all. This just irritated Lucy more as she shouted at him, asking if he had any idea how he looked right now. He then told him to look at War, saying that his body looked like it had been through a meat slicer, asking just what exactly had happened to their dog. But John just placed his hand on his head, saying, just like the notary had said, it was crawling with rats down there, and those vicious rats had torn Our to pieces. But Lucy then asked John about his condition, yet he could not say anything and just smiled at her weakly. Both Nick and Lucy were now looking at him, so he said that he was a lot bigger than a dog from the rat's point of view, and they got scared when they saw him. Lucy shouted that it made no sense, asking him what he was doing down there for 8 whole hours. She wanted to know just what was in that damned basement, shocking her son, who turned to look at his dad. John said that he did not know what was in there either, as he never made it all the way to the end. Lucy was shocked to hear this, wondering how he had not gone all the way. John said that the basement just kept going down and down. She was shocked that he had not reached the end, even after walking for 8 hours, saying that their basement must really be something. John said that he was going to keep going, but then he found the dog and stopped. Seeing that he was covered in blood, he guessed that Awar must have fought back with everything he had. For such a small dog to hold out that long was incredible. She then asked him why exactly he had stopped there, wondering if he had made it halfway through. John admitted that he did not know, but he could not go any further. He was scared too, reminding her how bad he was with darkness and violence. He said that anyone else would have turned back there as well, for one could not just keep walking blindly through pitch-black darkness. John kept thinking about Lucy and Nick and could not go any further into that darkness, as it felt like he was walking straight into death. This made the two look at him with concern. Lucy then hugged John, saying that she was sorry for pushing him so hard and telling him that it was over now. She said that they should seal that door up tight and never talk about this again. But John told her that it was not over, confusing Lucy. He said that there was an area where the walls were stained red and he couldn't go past that point. Anyone else would have stopped there too. He had always hated darkness and violence and was terrified. He still shuddered when he thought about that darkness inside the basement, but he could not stop there. For all he knew, he could have been almost at the end. Lucy asked if he was saying that he wanted to go back down there, to which John said that he did, as it was the path his Uncle Edmund had taken. Lucy was surprised to hear about him, but John explained that there was something about what he did down there, and he had to find out what it was. Lucy was stunned. She told him that if he loved her and Nick, then he wouldn't go down there again. Nick also begged his father not to go down, but he just looked at them with a blank face, saying that there was no other way. He had always been pathetic, and whenever he sensed danger, he would stop and quit whatever he was doing. That was just who he was. He had never once seen something dangerous through to the end, and he had never achieved anything he could call success in life. He had never gone all the way, thinking that he should have just stayed at the Seven Locks Company, as all the skills that he had picked up there were useless now, saying that he should have taken his chances in a rough neighborhood. Then maybe he would know how to deal with violence. Instead, he kept dodging anything hard, and turned into some clueless kid who doesn't know how the world works. Lucy said that he was talking nonsense, but John argued that it wasn't nonsense. He could not live in a cocoon forever. This basement had given him a chance to tear through that cocoon. If he did not see this through, he would spend the rest of his life staring at a coward in the mirror. Lucy understood that she could not stop him, telling him to let her go with him, but John told her to stay there, as this was his task, his road to walk. No one was allowed to interfere, asking if she understood him. He then told Nick to calm down, saying that he was going to give him a riddle. Hearing this, Nick stopped sobbing a little. John then handed him 6 matchsticks, asking him to make 4 equilateral triangles with them, telling him that if he thought the way people normally do, he would never find the answer. He had to think in a different way, and then he would definitely find it. The 6 matchstick riddle. Thanks to that riddle, his son Nick was able to calm down. For a moment, the shock and sorrow of seeing War come back as a lifeless body was gone, but it did nothing to calm his wife, Lucy. That evening, the couple had a rather heated argument, yet John still refused to say anything about the basement or its secret. The next day, John repaired the gap around the basement's iron door, put the padlock back on, and tied the only key to a cord and hung it around his neck. This concerned his wife and his son, but at least the door was now sealed once again. However, deep within the darkness, rumbling continued as the earthquake around 327 caused the roof of the cave to fall onto him and his attackers. Seizing this moment, 327 attacked back, freeing himself from the ants as he ran away. The roof continued to fall, but 327 jumped through the debris with his wings, flying away from the place. But before he could escape, the debris fell in front of him, blocking his path. 327 was now trapped, but that was not the end, as the floor beneath his feet began to crack, making him fall down, along with the rest of the nest. A sudden earthquake had collapsed a part of the city, and the ants released pheromones of fear. However, 327 was able to land safely with the help of its wings. But his fellow ants were not so fortunate, as they fell down, smashing onto the ground. The earthquake had saved him from the assassin's claws, but now they were all going to die like this. The workers had started moving the eggs to a safe zone, and the soldier ants were assembling the battle units, but 327 kept running. They then reached a safe area, wondering if the earthquake had stopped, but before anyone could say anything, the ground began shaking again, as the roof above them split open, with light shining onto them. The ceiling had been pierced, and the ants from the upper levels were falling down, making everyone question just what was coming into the city. A giant appendage launched itself into the city, tearing through everything. The ants were shocked to see the humongous pink and wet tentacle that had now invaded their city. But before they could react, the tentacle started thrashing around like a wild whip, killing an uncountable number of ants. The brave ant soldiers got on top of the tentacle, attacking it by biting down as hard as they could. This made the tentacle writhe in pain, as it soon retreated from the hole that it had come from. However, as soon as it was gone, it returned once again. The remaining ants started sounding the alarm, telling everyone to take cover, but the tentacle drove through them and was now headed towards 327. But as it was about to reach him, it stopped right in front of his face. A soldier ant pushed 327 away from the tentacle, telling him to run away, as he sounded the alarm again to raise the emergency alert. The roof above them started shaking once more as a giant monster tore through, smashing the soldier ant with its tongue. The monster scooped up a large number of ants, swallowing them with its tongue. The ants were devastated to see this, now understanding just what they were up against. The gray-headed woodpecker, its scientific name is Picus canis. In Korea, it is a common resident bird and an Eurasian species in the woodpecker family. Birds with a red patch on the head are male, and those without it are female. It is very fond of ants, so it is often seen on the ground licking up ants with its tongue. The woodpecker spat out its tongue, breaking through a group of ants. 327 watched as it scooped up and ate the ants in a single gulp, swallowing them down instantly. He then attacked again, smashing into more ants to feed. This was a level 3 emergency alert, as all the ants started sounding the alarm. They quickly rushed to take the eggs down, sending soldier ants to keep them safe. The gunner ants gathered and targeted the woodpecker's mouth. They started crawling up the bird's body, clutching onto its feathers as they got into formation. With the command from the troop leader, all the ants fired formic acid at the bird. This alerted the woodpecker as it started screeching in pain. But the ants kept firing their formic acid on its body, burning away through its feathers. Soon, the bird's nerves were exposed, as the ants stopped firing. They then started biting down on its flesh to tear it open. The woodpecker screamed in pain as its neck was being bitten, thrashing its wings against the nest as it tore through into it with its legs. The ants were now trying to find a way into the inside of the giant monster. They then found a way into the monster's body, telling everyone to charge into the monster's guts. The ants went inside the woodpecker's entrance, making it scream in pain as the ants on its neck distracted him by biting its flesh. Then one of the ants finally got through, piercing the woodpecker's flesh and making it bleed. The skin of the throat was finally open, allowing people to charge into it. As red blood pours from the intruder's torn flesh, the ants stop emitting alarm pheromones. This meant they now had the upper hand in the battle at the throat. Through the open wound, the soldier ants rush in all at once, focusing on the attack. They rescue the ants that the gray-headed woodpecker swallowed and that were still alive in its larynx. The soldier ants then head into the intruder's head, searching for a route to the brain. They then found an artery, following the blood being pushed up from the heart. They ride the blood that flows straight to the middle of the cerebral hemisphere, getting ready to burrow into the brain's gray matter. The woodpecker screamed in pain as another ant unit that entered the body pushes into the gray-headed woodpecker's lungs and pours in formic acid. Ants armed with powerful mandibles force their way up through the esophagus to join their comrades coming up from the anus. The soldiers that entered through the anus are racing up the monster's intestines. They ravage every organ they pass: gizzard, liver, heart, spleen, pancreas. They attack and tear apart each of the monster's inner strongholds. One of the ants managed to break through a vein, flooding that place with blood as it drowned in it. The platoon leader warned everyone to avoid any place where blood or lymph might gush out, telling them to pick their targets so they don't hit the muscle and nerve clusters. If they were careless, the convulsions of the flesh would crush their own body. He also told everyone to stay away from the parts full of bile and digestive juices, since touching those would melt their body. They then noticed something as the unit that came through the esophagus and the unit that came through the anus finally met near the monster's kidneys. The monster's heart was still beating, but the fire ants had already won this battle. They had brought down the giant invader. The giant predator that hunted them had now become their food. Ants from the entire city swarm over the huge bird and start carving it up, gathering the woodpecker's meat. Before long, the city's tunnels were crowded with ants carrying off woodpeckers' feathers and down as trophies. The builder ants had already begun repair work. They would raise the rounded roof again and restore the damaged tunnels. How was ant civilization built? To understand that, we have to go back hundreds of millions of years to when life first appeared on Earth. Insects were Earth's first inhabitants, but survival in this world was not in their favor. Small and fragile, they were all easy prey for predators. To survive, some insects choose to lay a huge number of eggs, counting on the chance that at least a few of their offspring will make it. Some chose poison and turned themselves into fearsome creatures. Some produced foul-tasting substances from special glands in their skin, so predators would find them unfit to eat. Others chose camouflage, making themselves look like grass or tree bark. But termites, doomed to be devoured in the primeval jungle before they could find any secret of survival, came up with an original solution. They decided to stop fighting alone and banded together, thinking that if they gathered and faced their enemies as one, it would be much harder for them to be attacked. The termites' solution was a survival strategy based on a complex social organization. They were clever insects. Termites were the first to build a society and the first true masters of the planet. With that, Edmund closed his latest chapter in the Encyclopedia of Relative and Absolute Knowledge. A man said that Edmund Wells did not leave good memories in that place. So when he left, no one tried to stop him. Even so, he seemed to have been extremely capable, saying that he once developed a new food bacterium. It was a bacterium that gave yogurt a pleasant aroma. The man said that in chemistry, Edmund would sometimes display flashes of genius that amazed people. However, it wasn't constant, saying that it came and went. John asked the man if the relations between him and Edmund were strained, but the man told him that it was more accurate to say that Edmund did not fit in with his colleagues, calling him a loner. The bacteria he had developed had brought enormous profit to the company, yet no one there gave him any real recognition. John asked if he could explain what he meant in more detail. The man said that in any team, there was always some sort of leader, but Edmund hated having a leader and couldn't stand hierarchical authority, saying that he always looked down on managers. Edmund said they held their positions just to give orders without ever really thinking, yet all of them were in a situation where they basically had to lick their boss's shoes. The man could not refuse that, because it was what the system demanded. Compared to that, Edmund came across as arrogant, and that grated on their nerves. In the end, his co-workers disliked him more than the very superiors he defied. John asked what happened when Edmund left the company, making the man silent for a moment. He said that Edmund had a dispute with one of their executives over something, and on that matter, he could say for sure that Edmund was completely in the right. Explaining that when Edmund realized that the executive was snooping around his office, he laid a trap and taught him a lesson. But no one took Edmund's side. And when he saw that everyone blindly backed the executive, he had no choice but to leave. John was confused, recalling how the man had said that Edmund was right. The man said that sometimes it feels better to play the coward for someone you know, even if you dislike them, than to risk sticking your neck out for someone you barely know, even if you like them. Edmund had no friends there. He never shared a meal or a drink with them. He always seemed to be living in another world. This made John speechless. He questioned why the man was confessing his cowardice to him. The man said now that Edmund was dead, he could not help but feel they did him wrong, and since John was his nephew, telling him this story might offer him a bit of peace. With that, John left the Sweet Milk Building, heading to the National Center for Scientific Research, Fontainebleau Entomology Center. There, he asked a professor if he had met Edmund in Africa. The professor said that he had, saying that Edmund carried deep wounds in his heart. As he could recall, it was because of his wife's death. After that, he devoted his entire being to the study of insects. John asked Professor Daniel why it was insects of all things, to which he said that insects had all the reason to study them, explaining that insects have fascinated humans since ancient times. Long ago, their ancestors feared flies because they thought they carried fevers, and they disliked fleas because they made the body itch. They feared spiders because they could bite, and hated weevils because they ate stored grains. Such ideas had been passed down through generations, and insects have always annoyed humans. Even though insects were smaller and weaker than humans, they both looked down on them and felt threatened by them. And that was not all. Their bodies ultimately ended up in the stomachs of insects. This confused John, as Professor Daniel explained that they feed on corpses, surprising John as he had never thought about it that way. For a long time, insects had been considered the very symbol of harmful creatures. For example, it was no coincidence that Beelzebub, one of Satan's lieutenants, is depicted with the head of a fly. John said that ants gave a better impression than flies, but Daniel told him that it was not always the case, as it depended on culture. In the Talmud, ants symbolize honesty. In Tibetan Buddhism, they were used to mock materialistic behavior. On the other hand, among the bold people of Côte d'Ivoire in Africa, they believed that if a pregnant woman was bitten by an ant, she would give birth to a child with an ant's head. And some Polynesian tribes even regard ants as little gods. John said that he had heard that his uncle used to research bacteria, asking Daniel why he had stopped working on bacteria. Daniel said that compared to his insect studies, Edmund's bacteriology work was just a drop in the ocean, especially compared to his research on ants, something which shocked John. Back in the ant nest, 327 confirmed that the two assassins, reeking of stone, were no longer visible. 327 breathed a sigh of relief, thinking that they must have probably been crushed to death under the collapsed earth. He had survived only thanks to his wings, but 327 knew that this was just the beginning. Because those bastards erased his pheromone and Federation pheromone, any fellow ants he encountered would recognize him as an intruder. Without warning, they would spray formic acid at him and try to crush his head with their mandibles. He could not believe that things had ended up like this, thinking that it was all because of those damn 2 soldier ants that smelled like stone. 327 was growing frustrated at why they had done something so insane, wondering why they were trying to kill him. He concluded that they must be insane, as there was no way that they would do something like this if they weren't crazy. But then, 327 recalled that even the ants issuing the level 3 alert seemed a little strange. That's when a thought hit his mind. Those 2 stone-smelling ants were different. They were not insane. If anything, they seemed fully aware of what they were doing. If a genetic sequence goes wrong, it can cause this kind of psychological disorder. To put it another way, it was like cells destroying other cells of the same organism. The nurse ants called such ants cancer, recalling that cancer was a disease. So the stench coming from the group must be the smell of disease. This was something that he needed to report urgently. First, there was the dwarf ant's secret weapon, and now the cancer cells of Bellicon. But the first thing 327 needed to do was to survive. And the only ant that could recognize him by infrared without relying on scent was the Queen Mother herself. The Forbidden Zone where Queen Mother resides would be packed with soldier ants, but there was no other way to enter. After all, Queen Velokikuni once said that sometimes the most dangerous place was the safest of all. So 327 rushed towards his destination. At the far end of the dark, narrow passage, a wooden fortress came into view. He had arrived at the Forbidden Zone. Thanks to the pine tree stump, the city was able to withstand storms and floods, and within it were stored the queen's residence and precious food supplies. After the progenitor Velokikuni drifted to this land 5,000 years ago, the first enemies she encountered were termites. After a long, tedious war lasting 1,000 years, the Belokan ants emerged victorious and claimed this land, but they were astonished to discover their new home. The pine stump opened new horizons for them in urban planning and architecture. As the number of fire ants increased, the Belokan ants followed the direction of spreading roots, digging even deeper underground than the roots themselves. The Forbidden Zone, the birthplace of Bellicon, was now inhabited only by the Queen Mother and specially selected sentry ants, while all others lived on the outskirts. 327 approached the stump with irregular footsteps, as regular sound would alert others to an approaching presence. Hoping not to encounter any soldier ants, step by step, 327 finally encountered it, an ant blocking the entrance. Gatekeeper ants were genetically selected to have large, broad, flattened heads. When they block an entrance hole, their heads fit the opening perfectly, making it look as though a nail has been driven into place. These ants, which were living doors in their own right, proved their worth 780 years ago during the yellow ant invasion of the city. All Belokan survivors evacuated to the Forbidden Zone, and the gatekeeper ants sealed every entrance completely. It took the yellow ants an astonishing amount of time to pry open these living bolts. The gatekeepers not only blocked the openings but also used their sheer power to repel the enemy. Eventually, the yellow ants carved through the chitinous heads of the gatekeepers and forced their way in. But their sacrifice was not in vain. They bought time for allied cities to gather reinforcements and come to their aid, and now 327 was standing face to face with one of those gatekeeper ants. The gatekeeper ant said that 327 had no passage pheromone, calling him an intruder. But 327 asked him to just listen and check his antennae. The gatekeeper remained adamant, saying that an intruder had entered the Forbidden Zone, asking 327 what he was doing here, and just to try coming this way. The gatekeeper ant could only wait for an unseen enemy to approach. but against a worker ant capable of securing vision in darkness through infrared compound eyes, it stood no chance. 327 said that he was sorry as he had no choice, biting off the gatekeeper's mandibles. The incapacitated gatekeeper then slowly began to die. But as rigor mortis set in, its corpse sealed the entrance even more firmly. In the end, 327 decided to spray formic acid on the gatekeeper's forehead, saying that he was sorry. However, because of the thick head, it did not melt easily, requiring 4 more sprays of formic acid. But finally, the entrance opened. 327 tried to think of it this way: that the door had merely broken, trying to convince itself that it was nothing more than a door. He was merely breaking through a door and moving forward to warn his kin of the danger, staking his life. He tried to delude himself that he had just broken through the door that stood in his way and was passing on,